see us. This week has an interesting topic. It said the 7 convictions of the dedicated. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to be, but we'll see. Y'all welcome Rich Lively.
Thank you, Bill. Good to be here with you guys again. I'm a little further away now. I found out today, when I was just up the street here, you could really just get here in about 3 or 4 minutes. And today I had to budget. I'm like, boy, it's going to take a lot longer to get here. It was 25, almost 30 minutes from where I am now. So it's like it's a little different. And thank goodness it's not Orlando traffic. I went to a conference with a buddy of mine last week over in Orlando, and I was just like, I don't know anybody who lives in that city. Do you guys ever go to Orlando and wonder why anybody lives there? I mean, we had to go back and forth to the conference several times and going in the traffic, getting out of the traffic. I said, I just couldn't do this 2 hours of every day, having to sit in this stuff. So even though it was 30 minutes, it was awful nice. It was just kind of, the worst traffic was, the biggest decision was like, well, how do I cut through behind Uno's and get over here and have to turn left to get into Sunny's? That's not a bad decision to make. That's the worst traffic you're going to face. But it's good to be here with you guys again and see a lot of familiar faces and also new ones that I don't recognize. It's good to see a bunch of y'all here today. My actual title is 7 Convictions of the Committed. And I don't mean committed like to an asylum. We're talking about those who are willing to make a commitment to something. And that's a word today that's not exactly in vogue anymore, not a popular one, or probably not one of those hot ones people are looking for if they look up different popular words of the day, because commitment is something that's hard to come by and hard to find anymore these days. There's all kinds of statistics out there about how long people stay committed to one another and how many years and all of that stuff. And I'm not here to talk about marriage or divorce or anything today, but when you think about sports, and most of us, we relate to some kind of a sport team we enjoy following. We remember back in the olden days when a player was for that team, you followed that team and that player for life pretty much, didn't you? I mean, that guy was going to be on that team forever. I'm a big Braves fan. And that means I love pain, obviously, if I'm a Braves fan. And I remember back when they were really horrible in the 70s, and they could hardly get 5,000 people to show up to a baseball game. And so they did all kinds of crazy, they even had ostrich races at the game to try and get people to come and even watch ostriches because nobody wanted to come to watch the baseball team. But they were committed to staying there. And finally in the 80s, I don't know if you follow, but back in the 80s, we finally had an okay team. We finally made the playoffs for the first time. And my hero in the 80s was a guy named Dale Murphy. I don't know if you remember Dale Murphy from the Atlanta Braves. But he was an Atlanta Brave for life until they got rid of him. And that was the biggest just disappointment to me because I thought Dale Murphy will always be there for the rest of his life. And the day that he became a Philadelphia Philly, I was like, it's over. Teams are not committed to anything anymore, And you see it a lot today now. You see athletes that just switch teams, every offseason now. The big argument is like, well, who else are the Yankees going to buy out, right? They buy up everybody out there to just construct their team because they are the evil empire is what we think of them, right? Most of us, unless you're a Yankee fan. I'm not apologizing to you because I don't care if you're offended because I don't like the Yankees. So, but the point is, commitment is one of those things that's hard to really come by. Hey, even politicians are like, well, I used to be a Republican, I'm a Democrat. Or I was a Democrat. You thought they were going to be that for life, and they're even switching sides now, aren't they? And so, in a world where commitment is hard to come by, we are asked to be committed. We're asked to be committed to our wives and to our children. We're asked to be committed to, especially, our Lord and Savior. And when it comes to commitment, more than just salvation, there are many great lessons, obviously, throughout the Bible that we can look at that talk about what does it truly mean to be dedicated followers? What does it truly mean to be one of those that God can call on to say, that one is committed? And I want to look at a story from the Old Testament. You've got your e-version or your paper version of the Bible. We're going to be going all the way back to Chronicles, to 2 Chronicles. Now, the chroniclers were called that because they were chronicling the history of Israel, especially the kings. So if you know anything about all the kings of Israel, this is the 2 books that really talk about it. 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles give us a history of Israelite kings, starting all the way with Saul and then going all the way through Israel and Judah being taken off into captivity. And the background on Israel, when it became the northern kingdom, is they had 19 kings that served over a reign of about 300 years, give or take, and not one of them is listed in the Bible as being righteous or good. None. 300 years of leadership, and not one of them was called committed to God. And then you look at Judah in the southern kingdom, and they had about 20 kings, and they reigned about 420 years. They lasted longer than Israel, and there were only about 7-ish good kings. Some really say, well, there's really only 4, because the other 3 they did good for a while, and then they did bad, and then they did good again. So really, out of all of the kings, when you look at 39 kings in the history of Israel and Judah, basically you're scratching hard to try and find 4 gods who are committed to God. And every time in Kings and Chronicles, it will say there, it pretty much right there, it says, now this certain king became king at this year, and they'll say right away, he did right in the eyes of the Lord. Or they'll say, and he was evil before the Lord. And right there at that first sentence, you can say, well, we already know what the story's going to be like. So when you want to find one who's done pretty good, we have to do some digging. And in chapter 14 of 2nd Chronicles, we read about this guy named Asa, A-S-A. We read about when he became king of Judah, and in chapter 14, he decides that he's going to seek after the Lord. In fact, it says in verse 2, he did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. There's an indicator of what the rest of the story is going to be like. And in chapter 14, he's got a big battle. He decides to seek God, and God comes and delivers him and Judah from the Cushites, or the Egyptians, and he dedicates himself completely to God, and God hears his prayer and delivers them against all odds. Now, we're going to look at chapter 15, because this is where then, after he's established and things are going well for him, and there's peace all around him, he says, we got to clean up the mess around here. He realized that in his country, people weren't committed. They weren't committed to God, and he said, we've got to do something about that. And in chapter 15, I think we can see 7 examples of the convictions that Asa had, and he passed on to his people so that the whole nation could know what it truly meant to be committed to the Lord their God. Let's read together, chapter 15. The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Oded. He went out to meet Asa and said to him, listen to me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time, listen, for a long time, Israel was without the true God, without a priest to teach, and without the law. Can you imagine that? For a long time, the country didn't even know the person that they were founded upon. And there was not even a priest to delineate and differentiate between the sacred and the profane, because that's what a priest was supposed to do. I will show you what is right and what is wrong. I will teach you what is honorable before God and what is dishonorable before God. And so in those days, it's basically saying nobody knew what to do. They were doing their own thing. Early in the book of Genesis, it says people went around doing whatever was right in their own eyes. What does that sound like today? What was right in their own eyes. No guidance. No commitment. No conviction. But in their distress, they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, and he was found by them. In those days, it was not safe to travel about, for all the inhabitants of the lands were in great turmoil. One nation was being crushed by another, and one city by another, because God was troubling them with every kind of distress. But as for you, King Asa, be strong, and do not give up, for your work will be rewarded. When Asa heard these words and the prophecy of Azariah, son of Oded, the prophet, he took courage. And here he's going to go through the 7 things that I think he did in his nation. Number 1, he removed the detestable idols from the whole land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the towns he had captured in the hills of Ephraim. Number 1 of his reform that talked about conviction was this. He got rid of the evil and every sign. You see what it said he did there? He went through and he got rid of all of these idols and all of these altars and all of these things that were detestable. So he said, he figured out what is detestable to the Lord. If it's detestable to the Lord my God, then we can't have any part of it. And he didn't just do it for his palace and his people and his wives and all of the people serving. He said, we got to get rid of this in the whole nation. He took radical, extreme ideas and he said, we have to do this because we've got to get rid of the evil and every sign of it. The first step, I believe, of those who truly are committed, instead of just saying, well, I like going to church, or I like Jesus, and I know the first steps are just figuring him out. And I know we have churches filled with what we call seekers, and I'm glad they're seeking. They should be seeking. I'd rather them be seeking God than other stuff. So I understand that. But I'm talking to guys here, I believe, who have already figured out this Jesus thing. Most of us, I assume. We've already said, well, yeah, I know who Jesus is, and yeah, I go to such and such church, and I've been in the men's group, and I'm a deacon, or whatever it is. And that's fine. And that's good. But beyond that, it takes something that says, you know, there's some convictions in my life that I'm going to live by. And when we understand what is unpleasing or displeasing to God, the question for those who are committed and convicted by saying, well, what do the convictions say to you then? If you know in your heart and in your mind that there is something that God says, this is detestable to me, will you do something about it to get rid of it and every form of it in your life? You see, Asa looked throughout the land and said, we can't get serious about asking God to come and help us. We can't do real reform all over the land if we don't get rid of the things that God is really upset about. And that was the first thing he did. And his first conviction was, we're going to get rid of the evil and every sign of it. The question for us today is, when we know there's something that God doesn't want to have in our lives, what will we do about it to get rid of it? You say, well, no, it's not really evil. That's such a strong word. I mean, maybe it's not quite where I should be. Maybe it's not quite like that other guy in my Bible study who seems to be a little more joyful now because he studies. Maybe. You see, we like to categorize it that way, and yet what Asa realized was, listen, it's not just the idols, it's every sign of it, and I have to go throughout the land and purge my land of it and get rid of all of it. The first conviction of a committed person is to get rid of evil and every sign of it. Now it goes on from there. Look at 8b now. He goes on. He removed the detestable idols, and then after that he says, he repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the portico of the Lord's temple. So after he got rid of the evil and every sign, then he honored God by renovating his temple. The temple was in disrepair. There was an altar there, and it wasn't even being used properly. It was in shambles. And he said, well, we can't honor God if where we're supposed to honor him doesn't look right, isn't in good repair, can't be used properly. And so he renovated his temple. Now the question for us today then is, are you talking about we should be on the men's work team at our church? Well, I don't know, maybe. There might be some things at your church that your pastor's like, I've been talking about that squeaky door for 3 years and I still can't get anybody to fix it. I hope when he says squeaky door, he's not talking about you as a person. But you know, that's not the point. It's not about fixing up the church, although it might be. The point is in our own personal lives, we know that we are the temple of the Lord. We know that we were bought with a price. We know that this temple that belongs to the Lord is here to honor him above all else. And the question is, what is it in our life that needs renovation? You know, we read about in Ephesians the armor of God. Every day we're in a battle. Every day we've got to have on the armor. And we all know that in Ephesians it says, the fiery darts of the evil one are seeking, of course, to kill us and destroy us. We know that he's the lion who prowls around seeking whom he may devour. And so the question when it comes to our temple, not just the physical one, but the actual spiritual one is, what is it in our armor? What is it in our temple that has come under disrepair? You see, what was going on here was that it was not even actually inside. It was almost like they had taken the altar and said, you know, well, I'm not sure we're going to, let's put it out in front. We're sitting out there in front. Because there was no priest to lead, they couldn't actually even go into the temple. They couldn't even go into the house of the Lord. They had to put the altar out front. And here it is out front. It's not even inside to be protected. It's probably getting rained on and subject to the weather. And because there was no leadership to do the spiritual leading, it just came under disrepair. And what was going on in front of the temple was something that had to be repaired. The interesting thing, as I said, and as Peter calls us, is priesthood, the priesthood of believers. And as I said earlier, the priest is made to, his main role is to differentiate for the people the sacred, what is honorable to God, and the profane, that which is dishonorable to God. You know the interesting thing about that word profane, it literally means in front of the temple. Did you know that? And when we get this word profanity, what does profanity mean? When we say profanity, what does that mean? Yeah, wordy-dirts, we used to call them. Those are the wordy-dirts, right? The bad words. Oh, you shouldn't talk like that. That's not good talk. We call it profanity. And it literally means in front of the temple. And here's where it gets its origin. It means that on your way to the temple, on your way to worship, these are the things you do before you get there. That's literally what it means. So before you get to worship God, well, do all that other bad stuff out there, because when you go in, you're supposed to be good, right? And you go, oh, yeah, well, and you think, oh, I know somebody at my church that does that all the time. I know how he lives 6 days a week, but on the 7th day, he comes for an hour and he gets it all cleaned up, right? And literally, the profane is what is done before we go and put on our act. And you see, what was happening here in Asa's day was the sham that they said was acceptable to God was what was going on outside in front of the temple. And Asa realized that even out there, he had to do some cleanup. What renovation do you and I need to do today for our temple so that we are actually qualified as priests of our families and of our churches and of our nation to differentiate between the sacred and the profane? Because if we cannot do that because our own temple has not been renovated and the altar has not been repaired, so our lives are a place of worship constantly before God, Romans 12:2, a living sacrifice which is acceptable to God, then we have no right to try and differentiate between the sacred and the profane. Asa realized if we're going to start cleaning things up after I get rid of the evil and the other idols, I got to clean up the temple where we're supposed to be worshiping to do the right things before God. So he honored God and renovated the temple. Next after that it says, verse 9, he assembled all Judah and Benjamin and the people from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon who had settled among them, for large numbers had come over to him from Israel. Listen, when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. The third thing people of conviction do is they come together to encourage one another. You see what he did was he assembled all the people, and not only his people, but word got out. Hey, you ought to go down to Judah and see what's going on down there. You think it's bad up here, which it is in Israel. Go down to Judah. I mean, they're still our brothers and our cousins. They might let you in. I've heard Ace is doing some great stuff down there. And he was. And the people from far away came. Why? Because it says, when they saw what the Lord God was doing there. You know how it is. How many of you throughout your years have heard about, hey, you should go, there's a great revival going on over in this city. Drive over, it's going on 5 nights. I know we don't do revivals, but the old days of the tent revivals where somebody came to town and they brought the whole team, and they had some great music and a great preacher, and they'd set up a tent somewhere outside of town, and people would line up every night with cars to come to the revival, the tent revival. I know some of you are like, what is he talking about? This back in the, anybody remember these in the 70s? Sure. Yeah, some of y'all remember these in the 70s. You know what I'm talking about. And people would line up and drive up at night for the revival services. You remember that?
Before cable.
Yeah, before cable, before we could get them on television. Before everything else was on TV at night. But you see what happens is, when we start by getting rid of the evil and we renovate our temple, people start noticing there's something different. I don't know if you've ever had an epiphany in your life where you come to this point of conviction and all of a sudden the people around you, maybe it's your wife, she says, I don't know what it is about you, but you sure seem nicer this year. Or you sure are easier to love this week. Or your pastor comes to you and says, I don't know what's happened to you, but I sure am glad to have you in this church. And last year I was praying God would send you to another church. You see, then when we have been with Jesus, when our convictions are actually taking place with real demonstrable things in our life, people will notice. And here's the point. People will actually come over because they'll want to be around it. They'll come together for the encouragement. And I think what Asa realized that, hey, we got to get all together because we need to encourage one another, make sure this story goes throughout the whole land. This isn't just happening at the portico. This isn't just happening at the one place where we did some repairs. This is throughout the whole land, and we need everybody to get on board and be part of this. And you know, one of the most important things for us to do as men of the Word is to make sure we're sharing in the lives of one another to encourage one another, because it's not easy, is it? Because every day, every minute of every day, we are being bombarded constantly with other options of the decisions we could make with our life at any time. And we need one of the, because here's the point, guys. You know what? We notice in each other's life. We look at a brother and we say, man, something's different about you. It's awesome. You must be, are you getting close? Are you getting close to God? Because I'm trying to, and I want to learn from you. You know who else notices when that happens? Satan does too. Because as soon as he knows that some man is getting more convicted than he wants him to be, then he's going to join the party too, is he not? Yeah. And this is when we need the most encouragement. Because it's not when we are just, well, I'm on the top of the mountain, nobody can touch Satan, you can't touch me. He goes, I'll wait to come down a few days. You enjoy yourself up on top of the mountain. You three guys up there build a temple. Peter, go ahead and build that temple for a few days. Why don't you hang out up there on the Mount Transfiguration? Because he knew eventually they were coming back down. And you remember that story? Because when they were up there, and here's this wonderful time where Peter didn't know what to say, and James and John are just at least being quiet. At least they were smart enough to stay quiet. And Peter just blurts out, hey, this is great. Let's build 3 temples. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. I love it that Jesus didn't even respond. Now, he might have. It just didn't get recorded. The writers of the books might have said, you know, we can't put down what Jesus said to Peter that day. Because he might have said, Peter, you're a ding-a-ling. You need to just shut up right now. He might have said that, and it would have been funny in there. But the point is, we don't know what he said. They just kind of moved on, and then they came down. And you know what happened on the way down? You remember what happened? Because less than a chapter later, all the disciples are arguing. They're arguing over who's the greatest. Because you just know that those 3 guys, or at least Peter, I don't know about the other 2, but you know that they came down. And it was kind of like, do you guys remember the Brady Bunch? You remember the Brady Bunch, don't you? And there was one episode where Cindy, the youngest girl, she had a secret. And she just went around telling all her brothers and sisters. She had that little lisp, you know, and she goes, I've got a secret, I've got a secret. And she just loved it that she had something they didn't. And they were all getting jealous. And they were like, well, you got to tell us what that secret is, Cindy. You remember that? I don't know if y'all remember that episode. I do. I watched every Brady Bunch episode there was. But Cindy was just crowing about something and making them all jealous. Why does Cindy have a secret? We got to know. And they sat her down and all 5 said, you got to tell us that secret. That's kind of probably what happened on the way back down. What happened up there? Well, I'd love to tell you, but I can't. You know, and it wasn't sincere. They just loved that they got to go up on that mountain. And here they had this awesome experience. And they felt like we're untouchable. Satan can't touch us up here. We're on the mountain with Jesus. And Satan just says, I'll wait. I'll wait a couple of days. It won't take you long to come back down. And it didn't. And less than a chapter later, Jesus is saying, what were you guys arguing about on the road? And they didn't want to say it. It's, oh, good night, he knows, doesn't he? And they didn't say anything because they had been arguing about who was the greatest. And then he had to teach them another lesson like he did all the time. You see, guys, as soon as we get serious about our convictions, that's not the time to crow. That's not the time to go to another guy and say, oh, wait, you get up at 6 in the morning? I get up at 5. Oh, how many small groups are you part of? I'm part of that many plus another couple of accountability groups. You see, we get all excited about, oh, I'm convicted now and I'm committed now. And Satan goes, yeah, I know. Just wait. Just wait. I love to work around y'all committed people because I'm committed too. I'm committed to stealing and killing and destroying you. And I will. You see, think Asa realized, man, if we're going to do this, we've got to be in this thing together. And F.U.E.L is a wonderful place one time a week for us to come together and have really awesome food and hear hopefully a decent speaker once in a while. But we need to have our fellowship with other brothers in our church and in a small group and whatever it takes. Because trust me, guys, as soon as you have an epiphany from the Holy Spirit, somebody else out there is noticing the epiphany and he's going to jump right in on top of you. And we need to come together and encourage one another. That's number 3. number 4, right after that, verse 11, it says, at that time they sacrificed to the Lord 700 head of cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder they had brought back. I mean, they had a big whoop-de-doo, and it wasn't cheap. Can you imagine 7,700 different animals? Can you imagine what kind of a sacrifice that was that day? David earlier on had said, I will not sacrifice to the Lord that which costs me nothing. You see, many times our sacrifices are tiny or whatever, and God, I think, is sometimes saying, convicted people who are committed to me are willing to truly make a sacrifice that actually is a sacrifice. You know, going back to a baseball analogy these days, they have to be even careful now. And I know the guys appreciate it, but you know, the sacrifice bunt, which is almost an unknown art form anymore. And the only guys who actually practice it anymore these days, once in a while, is a pitcher, and they're pretty bad at it too. And then we have what's called the sacrifice fly. I mean, trust me, none of those guys are trying to actually hit a sacrifice fly, Chase. They all are trying to hit a home run. They all want to hit a home run. But they're awful happy when they put it down in the scorebook. Well, you don't have to count that as against you as an at-bat, because we'll call that a sacrifice fly. And it won't go against your batting average, which might affect your bonuses for having a certain batting average. You're getting paid extra incentives. You understand, right? And that sacrifice doesn't cost you anything because it doesn't even go in the books. It's just called a sacrifice fly. And they get all the high fives. Yes, it means a run. But you know that guy's going, dang it, I was trying to go for the home run. I wasn't trying to fly out. You see, the sacrifices cost them a lot. They used to realize, hey, if we're going to be serious about this, it's going to cost us something. It's going to cost us something we love. Those things that are near and dear to us. Because you see what it says there? They gave that all from the plunder they had just taken away from the previous chapter. And all the guys in the rank and file and all those who fought, they're like, man, this is awesome. This is great pay, because it's not like they were some giant paid militia getting paid a ton of money to go to war. They got what was left over from the spoils of war. So when it was over, they'd go in. Now you get to take that much for you. And you get three cows and eight goats. Awesome. Ooh, I'll take that. That's my pay, right? And the nation comes around and says, hey guys, you know all that. And in fact, I love it because in chapter 14 it actually says the word booty. It says they took booty. I was like, that's like the first pirate reference in the Bible. They took booty. Arr. And they brought it back. And Asa says, guys, I'm going to have to ask for some of that because we need to be serious about what we're doing to God. And he took their booty, and he took their plunder, and he sacrificed it. And you see, many times in our lives, we have to ask ourselves, well, what am I doing that is really just kind of like a sacrifice bunt or sacrifice fly, because it doesn't really count. And God is saying, but what will you truly sacrifice to me, which is precious to you? Next, after that, number 5, they got serious about commitment. Verse 12 says this: they entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, with all their heart and soul. The sad part about that verse, although it's a great verse about being committed, is the Lord, the God of their fathers. You see, when we just read earlier that nobody knew what they were doing, there was no priest in the land, something that was going wrong, there needed to be a revival. It didn't even say the Lord, their God. It said the Lord, the God of their fathers. In the book of Judges, there's one of the saddest verses, I believe, in the whole Bible, that after Joshua had done what Joshua did. You know, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down, and he led them into the promised land. In the book of Judges, one of the saddest verses says, right after the beginning, when they start turning, it says, and there grew up a generation that neither knew nor feared the Lord their God. Didn't even know about him anymore. There was a whole generation not very far removed from Joshua. There was only one generation removed from Moses and all that he had done. That a very generation very soon after that had no idea what they were talking about anymore. And even though God had said, set up these stones here so that when your children ask you, you may say, this is what God did for us. They didn't even know what those stones were for anymore. And there was a generation that grew up that neither knew nor worshiped nor sought after the Lord their God. And here Asa was having to come full circle and say, we've got a nation here that doesn't even know who God is anymore. And I need to get serious about commitment. It says we're going to enter a covenant. We're going to enter into a covenant, which is not just a, well, let's shake hands on this. But this is something that's supposed to bind us for life and our generations after us. You see, not just a portion of them, but their heart and soul, every part of them. They got serious about commitment. You know the old Marines commercial? A lot of, some of the greatest commercials are by the Marines and the other armed forces. And one of them I remember in particular back in the 80s was a chess match. I don't know if you remember this one. And the chess pieces came to life, and there was a real guy on a horse, and it was just like chess. And in the end, he finally defeats the king, and the king kneels down. And I don't know if you remember that one. And they do the sword, and as soon as they go down with the sword, lightning hits it, and then all of a sudden, instead of being like a chess match, the guy flicks it back up, and it's the Marine standing there, in his dress outfit, and you're like, whoa! Did you watch this as a kid? You're like, that's awesome, because he's got the square jaw, and he's looking right through the screen. You're like, I'm gonna do that. Remember what I said after that? We're looking for a few good men with the stuff it takes. That's what they said, with the stuff. And it's like, well, that's not great English stuff. They could use, no, it was really directed. We're looking for, and he's looking at you. And the voice comes on the narrator with that great voice. We're looking for a few good men with the stuff it takes to be one of the few, the proud, the Marines. I don't know if you remember that commercial. Now, they weren't saying that Army, Navy, and Air Force were bad. They were just saying they were badder. They were better. That the Marines, you want to be real serious? You come join us. We're looking for the men with the stuff it takes. And I think Asa was saying that. He goes, hey, I got to have men to rise up around me with the stuff it takes to truly be convicted and committed. Number 6, verses 14 and 15, it says here, they took an oath to the Lord with loud acclamation, with shouting, and with trumpets and horns. And all Judah rejoiced about the oath because they had sworn it wholeheartedly. They sought God eagerly, and he was found by them. And then it says, so the Lord gave them rest on every side. Now couple that with early in the chapter where it says that nations were crushing nations and cities were crushing cities, and it wasn't safe to travel anywhere. And then here's the contrast. After these things happened in Asa's life, those convictions came about, and it says, and God gave them rest on every side. Not just one side. Not like, well, I'll protect you from the Egyptians now, but I can't do anything about the Amalekites and the, all the other ites that come across the Jordan. It was on every side. They had rest. And why was that? Because conviction number 6 is seek God above all else. They sought God above all else and made that commitment to him. Number 7 is one that comes afterwards, but I think it's really key as we close up, and it's this. Be bold to do what is right, regardless of the ramifications. See what happened here. In verse 16, it says this. King Asa also deposed his grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother, because she had made a repulsive Asherah pole. He cut the pole down, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Now, well, that's an interesting afterthought. It's almost sort of like a, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you this, P.S. But this is huge, because you know what he's doing? He's going against his wife's mama. He's going against the one who brought, and he probably had many. We know the kings had a lot there, and we're not sure all the details about this, but she was pretty important, or else she wouldn't have been in there. And they even named her by name. So apparently everybody who read this knew about, oh my goodness, you did what to Maacah? Nobody does that to Maacah. And yet Asa did it. You see, Maacah must have been a pretty influential, pretty scary woman to deal with. And she probably was running the roost somehow. And it was probably one of those people that was like, just don't get on her bad, just don't get on her bad side. And when somebody was getting on her bad side, I was like, I'm just getting out of here. I can't handle it. I didn't want to be around for this. There was something about Maacah that was pretty crazy. She reminds me of some of those evil Disney queen-like characters, probably. And it says Asa even went to her and said, you're done. I'm not going to kill you, but you're going to go live in a hut outside. Or so we're going to make you a little place out, but you're done. Your influence is finished here. And maybe she would have said, oh, King Asa, okay, but let me at least worship. I know we're done with that too. I'm going to take that Asherah pole of yours and I'm cutting it down. And everybody's going to know I'm going to burn it up in the Kidron, because what he's doing there, he's going, I'm declaring war on your God because my God's greater than your God. And no matter what you worship, my God is greater, and it's over. And you're done. So there's a reason that little verse is in there. And see, the point is this. He was bold to do what was right, regardless of the ramifications. And I know we all have people in our lives that we walk around on eggshells. And I know we all have people in our lives like, man, I wish, but I don't know how to confront. I'm not saying you have a mother-in-law who worships other gods in your house. I hope not. But my point is, we have to do the bold thing, regardless of the ramifications. Now, thankfully here, we don't see anything that she did after that and led a revolt or something. We're not sure, but I think it was over after that, because if she had, I think we would have read about it. And it worked out right for him. You see, he was setting an example for his whole country. They're like, this king will even do the really, really hard stuff that nobody else had the guts to do. And you see, that's what committed people do. You see, what is it in your life and in my life that we need to do for our kingdom, which is our families or our household? And what do we need to do that would help follow the patterns of Asa? And how committed are we to our convictions? Now, I hate to tell you this part of the story as we close up here. But the next chapter, you read it on your own, it's really sad. It's sort of like a sad epitaph on his grave, that we saw that in 14, he sought after God, and God came and delivered him. And we see in chapter 15 twice where it says, and they sought after God, and God was found by them, which is very similar to when Jeremiah talks about it. And when you seek me, you will find me. When you seek me with all your heart, and I will be found by you. Jeremiah 29, 13, and 14. Unfortunately, in the next chapter, there's another war going on, and this time he decides, well, God, I guess it's been 20 years. Maybe I need to find a new partner. And he seeks after a different king instead of God. And because of that, he's plunged back into war. And he had 20 great years. And then after that, it was trouble till he died. You see, here's the point. And we know this. And you've seen athletes, and you've seen political leaders and pastors. A whole lifetime of good stuff can be destroyed like that, can't it? One immoral failure, one bad decision, one person you beat up and get on some camera doing it, and your career is over. We all know that, don't we? And you see, the convictions of the committed are for life. Not for some good years, not for 20 years, but for life. And you see, I know that we want people to come to know Jesus, and we want them to become Christians, and that's wonderful, and God really wants them to do that too. But he wants people who are fully devoted and committed to him and are willing to go through the tough convictions that are not easy. Everything Asa did was not at all what the country expected of him, but it was exactly what his God expected of him. And I wish we didn't have chapter 16. But we did. And a cautionary tale for us today is, first of all, look at 14, 15, and 16 in 2 Chronicles. And really look at 15, these convictions. But don't forget to read 16, and then get on your knees and pray, God, help me not to be an Asa who's only committed for a season of my life, but make me someone who's committed for all of my life. The 7 convictions of the truly committed will radically change your life and your family's life if you put them into practice. Find those things in your life. Renovate your temple. Find anything in your life that's detestable to God and get rid of it, every trace of it. Do the things that are right in God's eyes, and he will honor you. And you know what he'll do? It says here, you'll find him, he'll be found by you, and he'll give you rest on every side. Not some sides, every side. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for a lesson from a king of old. It's so sad to look at the history of Israel and realize that in Israel and Judah, out of 39 kings, it was hard to even find 4 who honored you. And yet, Lord, we read a great story today of one who honored you mostly, and we thank you for his convictions. And Lord, we're convicted by where he failed also. And God, we know I think everybody in this room, if we ask for a raise of hands, they'd say, I've failed miserably at one thing or another. Maybe it was morally at one point in my life, or how I've treated my wife, or my commitment to my church, or a job, or something, I don't know. Now, the wonderful thing, Lord, is that even when we're that way, you call us back to yourself. And as Asa found out and his people found out, when you seek me, you will find me. When you seek me with all your heart, and I will be found by you. You're not playing hide. It doesn't mean you're hiding. It just means you're waiting for us to truly seek after you. And that verse in chapter 16 is a reminder us that we've all heard it before. For the eyes of the Lord are roaming back and forth, seeking for those who are fully committed. The eyes of the Lord are seeking those who are fully committed. And it was a cautionary tale in Asa's life where he didn't do that, and another one came to speak into his life. God, I pray that we as your men would be those of conviction and would take maybe some of these or all of these 7 convictions and truly commit ourselves to you. You don't need freaks or fanatics, but you do need a faithful few. You need men with the stuff it takes to be different, to be called, to be your kind of Marines, the men that you can count on, to fight on the battle lines, for our very souls, for our families, for our nation and our world. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Rich. That was a great message as always. I want to thank you guys for coming. Remember, Sundays is our work basket. They donate the lunch for us, but we in turn try and give back to them. There was a card going around here that we were signing, a thank you card for Sundays. Anybody that hasn't signed that card, please sign it before you get out of here. Next week there will be no fuel. There's Thanksgiving week. Y'all enjoy your families, and we'll see you the following week with a great speaker, Pastor Jim Johnson. We'll see you then. Thank you.